Now, I'm going to start by saying something that I never thought I would, something that some might consider blasphemy, which is that Star Wars just might have a thing or two to learn from Star Trek. Or perhaps I should say something to learn from the third season of the show Picard, because some of the other recent Star Trek that I've watched hasn't been the best, though in all honesty I haven't watched much of it, mainly because, well, it hasn't been the best. In fact, I tried to watch the first two seasons of Picard and struggled and ultimately failed to get through it since, to me, a more casual fan of Star Trek, it just didn't feel like the same character or the same Star Trek universe anymore. There was something off about it, and so I turned it off and didn't really think twice about it until I heard from some that the third season of Picard felt a lot more like the character and show of old. Which lured me back because, simply put, I just want to see the Picard I remember from Star Trek The Next Generation when I was much younger. I want to see him go on one final mission against difficult or impossible odds. I wanted to see the character I've always known and loved from back in the day. I wanted to see him challenged in a new and unique way, but I wanted him to be the same character, not changed or reimagined to be worked into a new show that didn't seem to care all too much about honoring him or what came before. And so, in this third season of Picard, I'm happy to say we are finally not only getting the Picard of old, but all of the original main characters from the Next Generation are back together again in a very, very cool way. And I do mean very cool. And though I don't want to tread too far into spoiler territory, in case you're someone who sees this video and wants to give this third season a chance after maybe not liking the first two like me, or maybe you're just not all caught up. Anyway, let me just say that this show did something at the end of the most recent episode that was probably the most heavy dose of nostalgia I have ever seen in anything ever, but was so good and so emotional and worked so perfectly that I will forgive it for being the ultimate fan service moment of all time. And it was something that, though obviously different characters and setting, it should have been replicated in a way in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and if you've seen Picard, you're probably going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. Though all that said, and hopefully not to sound too hypocritical here, but it's not like this third season of Picard has been absolutely flawless, because despite the moment I was just talking about working so well, at times I do think it tries a little too hard to give fans exactly what they want. It can be rather heavy-handed with the nostalgia and fan service, to the point where I think there has been a callback to, or an Easter egg for, every piece of Star Wars content ever made, and I mean that almost literally. And mind you, again, I am not the biggest Star Trek fan on the planet, so I'm sure there has been plenty of things I've missed. Either way, this is something clearly made for the fans first and foremost. This is something that tries very, very hard, again, maybe a little too hard at times, to honor what came before and to bring a smile to the face of fans of Star Trek The Next Generation, and from the fans at least I've talked to or heard from, it seems to be doing just that. Though, don't get me wrong here, it's not just bad fan fiction brought to screen. There is a fresh story here, and it's not or hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows for the characters of old. It's not like it's been a perfect life for all of them, and there are big reveals and new challenges that they have to face and struggle against. They're certainly being tested with some pretty big things, both personally or internally, and externally, or what's going on in the galaxy. But even though it has been a hard or imperfect life for some of them, it is still them. It's still the characters we know from before, which is why I enjoy this so much. I'm glad it breaks with the recent trend, or at least a recent Star Wars trend, of bringing back old legacy characters and showing them broken or having reverted back to a previous state. The best or worst examples of this would be, of course, Luke in The Last Jedi having given up on the Jedi, and Han in The Force Awakens going back to a life of smuggling. I mean, it's almost as if these writers don't realize that not everyone falls apart and gets bitter when they get older, or breaks because of difficult things that have happened to them throughout their life. That one of the things we loved about characters like Han and Luke in the first place was their resilience, their unwillingness to give up, or worse yet, wallow in self-pity. It's as if they believe that most people, again when they get older, regret their choices in life so much that they can't cope with them, and end up hating everything about themselves, which is a very, very sad way to look at life. But Picard Season 3 isn't doing anything like that. It doesn't need to reset or break the character of Jean-Luc Picard first in order to do something interesting with him now. And again, without going into spoiler territory here, it's not showing Picard regretting his past choices as much as it's making him wonder what could have been, and offering him new choices going forward, a way for him to stay true to the captain or admiral he's always been, while redeeming what could be seen as regrets or mistakes he's made along the way, without making him hate himself in the process. Nor does it imply that in order to still be interesting, there must be some sort of huge change brought about by a catastrophic, life-altering event, even though you could argue, yes, there are big events or are big things he learns that could in theory change him going forward or make him truly regret the past. And though, yes, they have a pretty profound effect on him, he doesn't suddenly become something or someone different because of them. In fact, they ultimately make him reaffirm himself and those choices. And so now here he is, a man in his later years, coming to peace and to terms with who he is and what he has done, despite some mistakes, all the while bravely and boldly confronting a new challenge, no doubt a final challenge for the character. Which, yeah, I'm now going to say exactly what you expect me to say, which is, this is how Luke Skywalker should have been handled in the sequel trilogy. Because despite some out there thinking that I and other fans wanted to see a perfected version of the character do nothing but kick ass and save the day, I wanted to see something more complex and intricate than that. Something between God Luke and completely broken Luke. I wanted to see a man who didn't outright reject his past and his legacy, but rather carefully reflected upon that past and grappled with what it all meant for the future of the Jedi Order. I wanted him to ask why, in a sense, attachments condemned his father, but love was a big part of the reason why he himself was successful. And thus he had to ask himself just what place, if any, do attachments have in the life of a Jedi, and what is or where is the line between love and attachment, because they are not one and the same. Instead, the word attachment, just like the name Anakin, is never uttered in the sequel trilogy, and the question of what is or what it means to be a Jedi is never addressed. And what was one of the core themes explored in the previous films, the internal battle of selfless versus selfish, a battle we all fight and can relate to, it scraps that in favor of a question or theme about it not mattering where you originally come from, as if both Luke and Anakin initially came from somewhere beyond growing up as nobodies on Tatooine. Or at least that was the theme until it wasn't anymore in the third film of the trilogy, when suddenly where you came from or who you were born to meant something. And suddenly J.J. Abrams was inclined to give Luke Skywalker something to do because he'd been afraid to use him in the first film, in The Force Awakens. And yes, he literally admitted he didn't know what to do with Luke, yet they still let him write that film. He didn't know what to do where he wouldn't eclipse the other characters, the new characters, so he instead did virtually nothing with him. And though I certainly understand and agree with Disney and Lucasfilm for wanting to bring in new characters for the new sequel trilogy to kind of pass the torch to a new generation, I will never understand, considering it was already a nostalgia fest anyway, why they didn't go the Picard Season 3 route with Episode 7, why they didn't embrace the fact that, yes, pretty much no matter what you do, Luke Skywalker is going to outshine any other character. He's going to be your main character in the first movie back because he was that important in the previous ones. I will never understand why there was no moment in that film where the old cast got back together one final time, why they, again, like in this new season of Picard, didn't have not only one last moment to shine, one final victory, but why that victory didn't show us or affirm that everything they'd fought for in life was worth it and had amounted to something. Why not, with the first film of the trilogy, instead of showing the New Republic get nuked like an afterthought, the New Republic our heroes of old had fought so hard to reestablish, why not show it facing an external threat, one that also threatens the new Jedi Order and also has a personal connection to our old characters, that then forces those heroes of old to band together to stop it, along with the help of some new next generation characters. Then it'll mainly be up to those new characters who learned from the heroes of old to face something that challenges them both internally and externally in the next two films, something they ultimately, of course, defeat, to not only reaffirm the sacrifices and legacy of the old characters, but to build them up as their own heroes too. And I mean, you might say that's a bit too tried and true, but there is a reason why something becomes tried and true, and that is because it tends to work no matter how many times you use it. And though I am all for new and different types of stories in Star Wars, I just don't think it's a good idea to get too creative with characters some fans have loved and been waiting to see again for decades. I don't think the Star Wars sequel trilogy needed to, say, go quite as far as Picard has when it comes to using nostalgia and giving fans exactly what they want, but it certainly should have and could have been more in that direction, been more like that, than whatever it was we got. Something that ended up leaving us feeling bitter towards the characters of old and not caring about the characters of new who are supposed to carry on that story. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Are you watching Picard Season 3, and do you think something like that direction, should have been what the sequels were? Should all the legacy characters have gotten one last final win in Episode 7 before a new generation comes in to carry on the torch in 8 and 9? Either way, whatever you think, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.